So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I recognise a few faces in the crowd there. Sorry if you're a little warm. They've assured me they're trying to get some more air conditioning in here, so hopefully it'll cool down soon. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves on the panel in just a moment, but I just want to kind of recap in terms of what we want to discuss, what we want to get across today. And it's really around a technical discussion into why AI is working in some industries and not in others. So with me, I will let Hassan introduce himself, and then we'll kick off with some questions.
Okay. So I'm Hassan. I'm a lead AI and machine learning technologist at Digital Catapult. So just a little bit about what Digital Catapult is. It's a non-profit that's funded by the UK government with the remit of accelerating adoption of advanced technologies like AI, 5G, IoT, XR, and DLT, and so on. And so we do lots of different things. So some of the things being, so we mostly work on the manufacturing and creative industry verticals, and we do lot of, so we do different kinds of things. We do consultancy work where we connect large corporate clients to startups that can solve their problems. We carry out collaborative R&D projects and also commercial projects. So these are the kinds of things we do. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Richard?
I'm Richard Self. I'm a senior lecturer in the governance of advanced and emerging technologies at the University of Derby. And what that really means is I'm looking at how do we take on board effectively and deliver value for our businesses from any new technology. And AI is just one of many that I and my students look at. And I'm currently working on this topic of AI success and failure. It mirrors what's been going on since 1994 by the Standish Group, their chaos reports, which look at the success and failure of ordinary IT. And the sad picture is that after 25 years or more, we're still only 35% of our projects, IT projects, are successful. And yet, with AI, apocryphally or anecdotally, we believe it's maybe as low as 12.5% successful. And my students are looking at a project or trying to categorize AI failures and successes and see if we can identify some underlying themes that will help us to actually make some steps and advise businesses. Thank you, Richard.
Ravinder.
Hi, myself Ravinder Singh. I am a modernizing technology program manager with the Cabinet Office, and particularly with the Central Digital and Data Office. Recently, role has changed. Earlier, I was consulting technical architect, so my role is working with government departments, across government departments, as a permanent civil servant, advising them on new technologies, new solutions, digital transformations, AI, machine learning, use of automation for bringing efficiencies within the government, as well as providing better services to the citizens. So Cabinet Office, probably you know the role of Cabinet Office. I need not tell you about that. So that's where we are in the technology area. Gov.uk, which you see, is all through us.
Thank you, Ravinder. Alok.
Thanks. My name is Alok Srivastav, and I'm Senior Solutions Manager at Supermicro. And Supermicro is located in California. We are headquartered in California. And what we do, we provide AI infrastructure ranging from edge to cloud. And that's what I do. And I work very closely with some big customers on these different verticals. And so from our side, it is infrastructure for AI infrastructure building blocks. That's what we do.
Thank you. Now, just to sort of kick things off, what I wanted to ask each of you is, what is your perspective at a very high level on the discussion topic today? Why AI is working on some industries and not others. And Richard, as you start off with some interesting stats, I wonder if you had some more by industry.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. It's not fully researched yet, but what's becoming reasonably clear, and we've had one or two sessions today already touching on the aspect, is that analytics, AI, is working in the field of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing, where we have causal relationships between the various parameters and what you might call the decision output. Where we seem to be having major problems is in the field of what you could call social sciences, where the data is based around people's perceptions, words, diagnosis. You go to your GP practice and see the 3 or 4 of the doctors about, I don't know, your foot, say. And then you inspect the notes, the GP notes in the system after each of those, and you'll find a different set of words, almost certainly. A bit of the coding might be similar, might be different, because they see things with their experience and their perceptions. And so it's where we have those, and these are actually the high-risk areas in the European Union to AI Act, which says if we're using AI, which is all forms of types of AI, from neural networks, pattern learning, expert systems from 50 years ago, and so on, and the analytics, predictive analytics we've been using for 20 years as big data analytics, those technologies cannot cope with subjective data that humans generate. And whether it's in HR systems or many business systems, if it's not the numbers that come from the business transactions, you may well have some serious issues. That's where I'm beginning to see things happening.
Thank you. And Ravinder, from a government perspective, I know you survey SMEs and the like. I'd be interested to see what that sort of feedback's been as you try to promote AI within the UK.
Yes, from government's perspective, as I spoke earlier in the morning also about that, that we are promoting open data, open APIs, open technologies, and trying to open government data for SMEs to work on those things, so that people can start using government data and develop new products, new services for citizens. Now the challenge is still because of the use of the data privacy and the ethics, because we cannot, sometimes it becomes a challenging issue from one department to share whole of the data. So we have to anonymize the data sets or pseudonymize the data sets so that people can still use them. But most of the data sets we have opened up all the APIs on gov.uk. All other government departments you will find on GitHub. Most of the APIs, most of the data is there, which you can work on. And if you really want to work with actual data, then you can have an NDA signed with the government, and then you can start working on the actual data also. But most of, up to that point, you can still work with the government. And that's the promotion from the UK government, which is there, that promoting small and medium enterprises to start using the government data and with the open APIs and start working on it so that we can promote AI technology and growth of the UK SMEs.
Okay, great. And Alok, from a Supermicro perspective, where do you see the most success in terms of the industries that you work with in implementing AI?
So first of all, we see a big surge in demand for AI infrastructure in recent years. And the reason is very obvious. First of all, if, as it says that why AI is working in certain industries and not in others. So the very obvious reason is that for AI, the most fundamental component of AI is a well-trained model, right? And for that, you need lots and lots of digital data. And that part was missing. So just a few years back, it started happening that we are having now lots and lots of digital data. So we can train our models better. And because of that, the error rate has gone down. So with error rate has gone down, so now it is becoming more and more acceptable on the commercial side or on the enterprise side. And that is the key which is driving AI now. So you see this big demand and big surge for AI infrastructure because of this reason.
Thank you. And Hassan, from your perspective, where are you seeing success with implementation of AI, in the industry?
So I think it would be more useful if I why does it actually make sense to look at AI adoption from the perspective of sectors rather than individual organizations? And that's because there are actually several reasons for that. So at a high level, the barriers that exist for AI adoption are actually common across different companies, across different sectors. So the things like lack of AI or data literacy, or things like lack of digitization, or cultural barriers, and so on. But what's really interesting is that the mitigations that you need might actually be quite common within the specific sectors. And so, so if you just look at trying to mitigate those barriers on an individual at the level of a single company, then it might be too expensive or to actually implement the solutions. That's one of the reasons. So if you look at the problem for at the sector level, you can actually create mitigations that maybe apply across the whole sector, and that way you are able to you're able to sort of encourage solution developers and vendors to develop solutions because it scales. And the other is that it also lets you develop things like standards and common data interfaces and common sort of requirements for your models and so on. And that's really useful. And that actually sort of lubricates the whole system. So it's really useful in that sense. I think like a really good example is in manufacturing. So a big problem in manufacturing is that lack of digitization. And so and the way you solve that problem is actually quite similar across different manufacturers. And so in that instance, you can actually have like an industrial body or government define standards that helps the market develop solutions that can be used across all the different companies. And there's another reason for it's really important to look at removing barriers from the perspective of sectors, and that's because there are certain problems you can only solve at the level at that level. So a good example is supply chain. So so supply chain, I think, as we all know right now, it's a massive problem. So we're facing lots of problems. The modern supply chains are really complex. They're global. They're actually networks. They're not supply chains, and they're highly interconnected. A problem at one node sort of propagates to the whole network and sort of messes everything up. And so AI can be really useful in solving this particular problem. By one of the ways is just forecasting like potential problems, but this is not happening because companies are the elements, the nodes within the supply chain, the companies that operate within the supply chain, are not really willing to share the data, and solving that requires the whole industry to come together. It requires having the right kind of incentive mechanism. It requires solving the right kind of technical AI problems. And so, and that can only happen, or requires maybe even government intervention to encourage people to share data and so on. So I think for this kinds of reason, it's actually really important to look at the problem of removing AI barriers at a sector level. Okay.
Thank you, and you've kind of led quite nicely onto my next question,
Right.
Which is, what are the things you can look to do to overcome those data, the model and implementation challenges? I'm going to start with Alok this time.
So as far as the implementation challenges, so first of all, as you all know, because of this digital data explosion, what is happening, the model sizes are getting bigger and better. So with model sizes getting bigger and better, so that is at an exponential rate, right? So that is what is happening. So just to put things in perspective, the digital data or the model parameters, they are doubling every 2.5 months, right? So the biggest challenge is to just process to keep these models updated, and so far we used to have one of the most successful model that pretty much everybody knows about it. That is Transformer. So Transformer, it just started in 2017, I guess, with 69 million parameters, and now as of just a few months back, 3-4 months back, it is GPT-3. So that was with 176 billion parameters. So you can see the huge jump. And not only that, just a couple of months back, NVIDIA and Microsoft, they announced the model that is 530 billion parameters. So you can see, at this rate, pretty soon, either by end of this year or by early next year, it is going to touch trillion parameters on a model. So these big models, how can you just process it? And the challenge is that, okay, it is, of course, AI is driven by software, but at the same time, it is very important to accelerate it via right infrastructure. And that's, my guess is.
And Richard, just in terms of what you, in terms of what you lecture and what you work on with your students around the right models, the right business solutions, the right business cases, where do you think is the best starting place or the place to start?
Interesting one. I think the thing that really comes out of a lot of what we've seen, whether it's with GPT-3 and OPT 175B, recently for natural language processing or anything else, we have to go right back to the beginning. These technologies are lovely, bright, and shiny, but what we have to do is to go back to find out what the business requirement is. In the 70s, the 80s, I remember that well, we had the same problem. Lots of lovely new shiny technologies, mainframes and stuff coming out of all over. They were solutions looking for problems. At the moment, too much of AI is a solution looking for problems. Everybody's diving in on it because it's the latest thing, one of the latest hyped things, and we've all got to have it, haven't we? And the thing we have to remember is to go back to our lessons we learned in the 70s, the 80s. What is my business problem that needs a solution? And then, when you've got a good requirement spec, now you start looking for what sort of technologies. It's not necessarily a language system or a whatever. It might be bog standard, ordinary, if-then-else technology, which has a nice advantage. It's explainable. It complies with whatever the regulations are if you built it correctly. It just takes a little bit longer to build, often. You can train up an insurance decision-making model overnight or over a weekend. You've just got 6 months worth of data, you throw it into it with the human decision-makings, and it's learned it in 3 days. If you want to code up that decision model, if then else, standard technology, it's going to cost you £1 million, take you 6 months probably. Which your business is going to be drawn to, and we have to fight that one. So what is your business solution or business requirement, and then go sort out what technologies might contribute and then evaluate them. Hey, we used to go and evaluate software packages. Get a requirement spec. I did this with project management systems in the mid-80s. And we had a short list of 6 different packages, and we then went and evaluated them. Why don't we do that with our AI packages today?
Thank you. And Ravinder, just from your perspective, some of the successful, AI programs that you're running for Cabinet or ones that you're looking to support on a sort of national scale, can you talk to either one of those or even both?
Some of the successful projects which we have done is quite kind of predicting. After the Brexit one was the lorries coming through the Dover, how many will be coming and how the customs will work and all that. The simulations have been done. But again, those kind of things, as Professor Richard has said, what's the problem you are trying to solve? I said that in the morning also. What is the business problem you are going to solve? If you are very clear about that, only then you can find a solution for that and particular solution. Is it operational efficiencies? Is it cost effectiveness? Is it manpower efficiencies? What you are trying to drive out of it. And that will drive out, okay, this is the best solution, and then this is the best model for it. Because the models, classifications, algorithms, they are all different for different purposes. If you are using algorithm which is good enough for a medical system, it may not be good for which is a textual data. So you need to think of which algorithm, which model, which classification you need to apply, and why you need to apply that. And if you can define that clearly, and that will be clearly defining your problem statement, and then clearly defining, okay, this is how I can supervise, or is it a supervised data, unsupervised data, learned data, activated learning, what kind of things which you need to put into it. But on the top of that, then it is a continuous learning process which you have to put. Because if you don't put that continuous learning, you have built a model today which is good enough for today, as Alok has said, that over the years the data is going to build, that model may not be able to support, that infrastructure may not be able to support. So you need to build that model which is progressive enough, it can build on top of it, scalable enough, which can give you the efficiencies going year forward, and then you can plan, okay, after 5 years I may need to look into this because my data is growing at this speed.
Thank you. And just concentrating on the positive elements of where AI adoption has been a lot more successful, pharma, finance, retail, and what can be done to keep the momentum going? Because now, how can they accelerate that? So, Hassan, I'm going to bring that to you.
In order to keep the momentum going, I think, so if you think about what the key barriers are, the key barriers to AI adoption is often a lack of the AI and data literacy within the organization. The key barrier is digitization and so on. So I think, so in those organizations, they have sort of to some extent been able to sort of overcome those barriers. So,
speak close.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, I thought, okay, all right. Yeah, so in those organizations, they have been sort of able to overcome those barriers. So that's why they're sort of successful. So the barrier that they're coming up again now is more around needing to change the culture, needing to needing to change the culture. That's the important one. They're coming up against a barrier of not having the right kind of skills. They're also coming up against a barrier of so this is related to the culture problem, which is the existence of data silos within the organization. And also in certain industries like pharma and sort of healthcare, there's an issue of regulatory restrictions as well. So all those problems sort of, so they've gone past the first level problem and they're now coming up with the second level problems. So the way to overcome those, I think it's a combination of things. So I think, again, like I said before, these problems can't really be, it's difficult to solve at an individual level, probably because of the depth complexity of the problem and the resources required. So from my perspective, what needs to happen is the industry as a whole sort of needs to come together and figure out how to address those changes. And possibly with help from government organizations like the one that I'm working for, not surprisingly, I guess. And so I think that's sort of the way to sort of go about doing that. Yeah.
And Alok, I was going to ask you from your perspective, what are the things that Supermicro that kind of looks to keep that momentum going?
Yeah, so one of the biggest thing I would like to add here is what they mentioned. So first of all, not only few of them are failing because of the wrong the most important thing is wrong selection of data also. Sometimes I was just reading one report and that says around 89% of the CIOs and all these guys, they understand that how important AI is to their business, but when the questions were asked, 52% of them, they failed to answer that what type of data they are looking for. So if they are not sure on the data side, so forget about the success of AI first. So that could be the key reason, number one. Number two is that, it's not, how should we get? So it is sort of, ERP mentality, that's what we call it. So ERP mentality means basically the entire company, they start working on one AI project and they put everything, all good resources on it without, testing it first. And that's another reason. And on the other side, if you see the successful AI projects, so what they do, they do multiple projects at a smaller scale. Once it succeeds, they start building on that rather than going that route. So that's why I was a little bit concerned about this one. When we say some industries it is not working, so I think we cannot say it is not working. We should say that it is work in progress.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you. And also, it's just different stages of maturity and adoption as well. I would also just ask, and Ravinder, this to you, in terms of talent, what kind of role do you feel that talent plays in the success of some sectors, over others as well, and whether there's a lack of talent as well?
Yes, the talent is a big issue, definitely. Within the government also, we have a challenge. We have so many posts vacant for people, but still we can't find right kind of skilled people working in this area. That's a big challenge. Probably universities and colleges, they have to ramp up their curriculum or include those new topics, new technology in the curriculum, so that we can, or have industry institute partnership, so that we can develop those kind of curriculum which industry can easily hire people, or they can have their centers there. But without the right amount or right skilled people, we cannot have successful implementation of AI or tools, or we cannot get the right outcomes. This is a big challenge which we are facing. When we advertise a role, we can't get the right amount of people. One challenge in government is, of course, there is a salary problem. We can't give to the same amount as in the private sector. That's another challenge which we have. So I think those two combined together, so we need to think of that. How can industry guide the institutes to have the curriculum which can be successful in implementing AI projects, or data scientists, that okay, these are the skill sets for the next 5 years. But after 5 years, we may not be having the same skill set which may be applicable, because it's so quickly changing things. The technology which is today, tomorrow it may not be there. So we need people with the data skills today, data scientist skills today, ethics, privacy skills, so that people can guide them how we can do the projects. But we need to think from progression, that after 5 years this may not be true, and then we need to change it again.
Thank you. Richard, from your perspective in academia, are you seeing other technologies competing, for the talent, or is it that you're seeing a greater requirement for the talent that comes through your doors? Can you just talk through a little bit about what you see from an academia perspective?
That's an interesting question. One of the things we in Derby are seeing is a very large ramping up in the number of applicants for our MSc in Big Data Analytics. At the moment, we have the way that a degree is constructed and validated. We identify about 6 modules, taught modules, and then there's the independent studies research project they do. And what we try to do is to cover various areas. So we have a ethics, trust and governance module, for example. And what we can do with that, and what we're allowed to do, is actually to work as things change. So how I taught that module, say, 5 years ago, because it's based around what's happening today, it just automatically migrates. Now, when you get into the technology stuff, the actual coding, that can be a little bit more tricky to actually keep rolling, because we have academics who are good at NLP, for example, and they will teach NLP. But as NLP changes, they hopefully will keep up to date. But if we have to bring in a new technology which doesn't fit within our 6 modules, that becomes a more interesting question. And then we have to take something out to put something in. And yeah, we can do that at about a year's notice. So we can, and we do tend to actually keep going. We're actually in the middle, or about to start, I think, a review as to whether we need to do make any changes. But we like to try and write the module so we can bring new technologies in without revalidating, and it's actually not difficult to do that. So at least certainly at Derby, we have the ability to do that. It's just the way you write these things. You don't write, it will use a particular algorithm. You say you will be critically evaluating and learning to use a range of the most up-to-date algorithms. You won't build in R and Python into this curriculum per se. You will just use the most recent, most modern, and so we can actually respond very, very rapidly where necessary.
And Alok, just from your perspective, do you think this kind of supports the growth of your own organization in terms of, there being a talent shortage or high expectation? Do you think that means that companies like you are able to gain more work with enterprises because they don't have the in-house expertise?
You are absolutely right. So this is an ongoing, challenge that all, especially any AI-related businesses, they are facing the same issue. And as they said, and the folks that you hire also, they should be of this mindset that it's a learning process. You just simply you got a job and then you just stop learning. So it is not going to work. So it's a continuous, just like the models, you have to constantly update them. So if you are working for AI, you are just like a model. You have to constantly update yourself with the right data. Otherwise, the model is obsolete. It's not going to work.
And Hassan, the same question to you really. Do you think it's supporting the growth of your organization right now or hindering?
The lack of AI talent. It's definitely hindering. I mean, this is what we're seeing just like within our organization. We're trying to get new people in. So yeah, the lack of AI talent is definitely a big problem. So it's a bit difficult to look in the future and see like how this might get resolved. So I think this would be around. I think we've already discussed this issues around low-code by adopting low-code, no-code platforms to help with this problem, so that you don't necessarily need full-scale data scientists or machine learning engineers to solve your problems. So the tooling is one thing, and of course also just straight upskilling the people who are already working in your organization. I think that's really important too. But like you said before, like a silver bullet doesn't exist.
I think we're out of time now, so I'd just like to thank everyone, Alok, Ravinder, Richard, and Hassan for your time. Very insightful. Do we have time for any questions? One question or two? Is there any questions at all for anyone out there? No, we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.